The Nazis built a thousand-year Reich, but who exactly brought the insane plans of the Nazi leaders to life? And for whom was all this intended? Goebbels, the propaganda mouthpiece of Nazism, claimed that it was all for the Germans and for the future of Germany. But what kind of future were the Nazis preparing for their fatherland? And who did they want to turn the Germans into? In the Ravensbrück concentration camp, there was a certain Dorothea Binz, an ordinary German girl who, after finishing school, joined the SS auxiliary unit. Many young German women did the same at the time. Initially, she was just a dishwasher in the SS canteen. However, young Dorothea was ambitious and had career aspirations. She was sent to train as a guard in the concentration camp, where she studied successfully at Ravensbrück and quickly proved to her superiors that she was capable of much more. She became a guard in the punishment block of the concentration camp, where prisoners who had committed some offense were held. Being in the punishment block was equivalent to a death sentence. Few came out alive. Dorothea tried very hard to reduce the number of surviving prisoners in the block, and her efforts were not in vain. The authorities noticed and appreciated her, and in 1943 they appointed Binz as the deputy chief guard of the concentration camp. The fates and lives of many thousands of prisoners of this death factory were in her hands, and in this position, Binz fully unleashed her cruelty. Physiologically, Binz simply could not pass by a prisoner without hitting her. She always carried a whip or a stick, and she had a vicious dog with her. On one occasion, in a fit of anger, she beat a prisoner to death with a pickaxe that happened to be in her hand. Dorothea also loved to ride a bicycle, which she used to patrol the areas where prisoners worked. While doing so, she would always crash into one of the prisoners, seemingly by accident, and then laugh heartily. Her jokes were such that she would often order prisoners to come to her in a separate room or an empty cell. There, Binz would lock herself in with the prisoner, force her to undress, and begin to torture the unfortunate woman. She would beat her with a whip and try to push the stick into her, as you can imagine where, and commit other atrocities. As she confessed in a small circle of her colleagues, the guards, it gave her a sense of spiritual satisfaction. Jenny Wanda Barkman, a former photo model, made a chilling decision to trade her glamorous life for the role of a guard in a concentration camp. From January 1944, she served in the Stutthof concentration camp, a small but deadly place. Here, Barkman indulged her sadistic impulses, mirroring the actions of the previously mentioned characters. She took delight in tormenting prisoners, often beating them to death with her bare hands. Her power extended to deciding the fate of prisoners, selecting them for the gas chambers with a mere gesture. This power over life and death seemed to fuel her twisted satisfaction. She would stroll past lines of prisoners, pointing out those chosen for execution, a fate sealed with a single gesture. Then in a cruel game, she would return, passing by a prisoner for the second or third time, only to suddenly point at them and declare, "And you too." For Jenny Wanda, it was all a macabre amusement. Known as the Red Ghost, and sometimes the Deadly Ghost, she brought terror and death in her wake. Ilse Koch, the wife of SS Standartenführer Karl Koch, commandant of the Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald, and Majdanek concentration camps, embodied the Aryan ideal in the eyes of the Nazis. She was ruthless in her treatment of those she deemed enemies of the Reich and the Kochs. Ilse took pleasure in searching through the belongings of new prisoners, appropriating whatever caught her fancy for herself, her husband, and their children. This seemingly caring and frugal German mother had a darker side. She relished being present during interrogations and torture sessions, finding spiritual excitement in the suffering of others. Her methods of torture were particularly cruel, often focusing on the genitals of her victims, causing them immense physical pain. The Kochs had a peculiar taste for products made from human skin, earning Ilse the nickname Lampshade Woman. It is said that she actively participated in the tanning process, using the skin of prisoners. Another nickname, the Witch of Buchenwald, further emphasized her sinister reputation. Irma Grese, another notorious guard, left an indelible mark of blood and terror across 3 concentration camps: Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Belsen. Her nicknames, the Blonde Beast and the Beautiful Beast, were fitting monikers for this ruthless executioner. Her favorite pastimes included beating prisoners, unleashing her dogs on them, and shooting them without a shred of remorse. Always equipped with a whip and a hungry dog, sometimes even two, she took pleasure in their suffering. Her whip, crafted from human skin, was a symbol of her depravity. She wore heavy boots, using them as deadly weapons to beat prisoners to death. Irma's cruelty extended to both men and women, despite being a guard in the women's section. She would request male prisoners from the men's section, undress them, and subject them to brutal beatings. Her particular pleasure was derived from grabbing men by their genitals, inflicting excruciating pain. Her dogs, trained to attack both men and women, were a source of twisted amusement for her. Rumors swirled that she sought physical intimacy with the guards and wardens of the camps, perhaps in search of the same spiritual satisfaction she found in tormenting others. Her fellow guards, some of whom were not without their own dark secrets, whispered behind her back, calling her insatiable and a bitch, acknowledging the depth of her depravity. Maria Mendel, the head of the women's section in the Auschwitz and Bernau camps, earned the chilling nickname, the Monster. She was responsible for the deaths of countless prisoners, a number reaching into the hundreds of thousands. Mendel, a music enthusiast, initiated the formation of an orchestra that greeted each new batch of prisoners with a haunting melody. In her twisted logic, a good musician had a chance at survival within the camp. She segregated female musicians into a separate section of the barracks, exempting them from hard labor and providing them with better food. The girls from the camp brothel also received slightly better treatment, but the fate of all other prisoners was sealed with cruel nicknames and a swift death. Mandel's cruelty extended beyond physical torture. She enjoyed playing with people's emotions, bringing prisoners close to her, only to discard them when they no longer amused her. These prisoners could be anyone who caught her fancy, a girl, a mother with a child, or even a lone child. She would shower them with attention, providing good food, nice clothing, and walks, creating a temporary paradise. But this paradise was fleeting. When Mandel grew tired of them, she would send them back to the harsh reality of the barracks, or, more often, to the gas chambers. In this callous manner, she ended the lives of approximately 500,000 prisoners. Her reign of terror concluded as the head of the women's section in the Dachau concentration camp. In August 1945, the Americans arrested her, and in November 1946, they transferred her to Polish custody at their request. A Polish court sentenced her to death in December 1947, and in January 1948, she was hanged in a Krakow prison, bringing her reign of terror to an end. This chilling list of female perpetrators could go on, as there were countless women who, under the influence of Nazi ideology, transformed into monsters, committing unspeakable atrocities. These examples serve as a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals.